Welcome to the Ground and Pone Podcast, a weekly show for fans of combat sports, gaming, entertainment, and plenty more. I'm Brian Shea, online content director at Game Informer, joined as always by Scott Fontana, the New York Post's MMA reporter. It wasn't a particularly big week for MMA or gaming, but we do have some talkers to get to. But before we dive into the MMA side of things, Scott, we have some boxing to talk about, surprisingly. Did you watch Anderson Silva versus Jake Paul?
I did, and you know what I did? I gave them my money.
Oh, no. See, at least I was smart enough to just catch the highlights on Twitter afterwards.
Yeah, I was interested to watch, and I was at a party. I actually took the day off to go to a Halloween party, and since I was out there, I was like, you know what? I kind of want to watch the fight. So I ordered it, and a bunch of us watched it as well. And, it's not like I'm sitting there as like a fan, like, go Anderson, but like, because I interviewed him and, just still some professional to it, but I'm not there, so I can kind of do what I want. But I'm sitting there, I'm like, God, it would kind of hurt my soul if Anderson Silva lost to Jake Paul.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, that's exactly what happened.
But at least it wasn't a Tyron Woodley situation where he gets knocked unconscious.
No, but he was knocked down in the end. It was like, I saw a close fight, but the live scoring that was being done by the unofficial scoring that was being done by Steve Farhood was for part of the Showtime broadcast was saying, yes, Jake Paul is winning at this point. I was looking online as it's kind of going on, kind of gauging what some people are saying. Obviously, there's a bunch of people, let's say more MMA slanted people who are thinking that Anderson Silva might be winning this. I saw him as winning, but I saw a lot of close rounds. And then, there was someone I want to say it was like Luke Thomas was like, yeah, I think Jake Paul is winning this. I think he gave his round score. So it was like when I saw, Luke has at least some understanding of how scoring works, at least on the MMA side. I guess boxing too. He does probably more boxing than a lot of MMA guys do.
Well, now he does, especially with Morning Combat, because that's like half and half.
Exactly. So, he's got a little more familiarity than like, let's say the average just MMA guy. So when he saw that, I was like, maybe it isn't going that way, So I was prepared for it. But then the knockdown at the end, it was just like, it cemented everything, but it also made it like that much. If it had just gone like petered out, and like, he put up a good spirited showing in the end, but like it didn't go his way. It's like, that stinks. But like the knockdown, I'm like, gosh, that sucks.
But also it's like a 25-year-old man against a guy who's almost twice his age.
He's literally like, he's old enough to be his father. Anderson Silva has children that are older than Jake Paul.
Yeah. I mean, he would have been 23 if he had Jake Paul.
So I'm saying he literally has like, I think his oldest child is about a year and a half older than Jake Paul. So
Jesus,
he truly could be his father, I mean, not biologically, but age wise. And so it's not like it doesn't make sense that he would lose, but it was the knockdown that was just like, and it didn't have to happen. There was like 2 minutes left in the fight. They got so far and it was like, damn it, that hurts.
Yeah.
It kind of hurts.
Again, at least it wasn't something vicious and brutal, because we've seen that happen to our various MMA heroes. I mean, not that
Tyron Woodley was the MMA hero of the people, right? He was pretty much just like, well, we needed him to beat him, and then he didn't.
I'm just talking in general. I'm talking like the Chuck Liddells, the BJ Penns of the world, where it's like, that's not the ending I wanted their career to have.
But you know what? You accept it when it's within their own sport. I don't know. I mean, maybe it makes even more sense that he was, but it's just, I guess it's just the idea that it's freaking Jake Paul.
Yeah.
He's the guy who goes out there and fights like the guys he shouldn't be fighting, but he ends up winning. And it's like, you think to yourself, like, this guy, he can't be that good. Like, he's probably not bad, but he's also probably not that good. Anderson Silva had won a couple of boxing matches in the last year. He beat Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., which, I mean, now as I kind of look back at it and I see what we had in this Jake Paul fight, I'm like, man, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. is terrible. He must be terrible because he did not look good in that fight. And that was Anderson's first boxing match in 2 decades.
I mean, that's what I've heard. I think Morning Combat, speaking of them, I think they were the ones who were like, yeah, but he's a far cry from his father. And
no, of course. But having said that, I mean, he did win boxing titles. Now, granted, there's a billion of them, but like he achieved some measure of success in this sport. to the point where put it this way, even after this weekend, Jake Paul has not achieved the level of success in boxing on a meritocracy standpoint. Money wise, of course, we're talking about a different metric, right? But like from the actual results within the ring, he has not achieved nearly as much because Anderson Silva at this point is the most experienced boxer he's ever faced, strictly boxing. And Anderson Silva's only got now, I think, 4 or 5 boxing matches. So it's still not that much.
Yeah. And speaking of the money side, I hope Anderson got paid. Like that's the silver lining. That's the silver lining to this whole thing.
I think he did.
If that man is leaving the ring with a fat paycheck, I am happy that I think we got one of the best case scenarios. He didn't get viciously finished, and he's leaving a much richer man. He is.
And I mean, I've seen some takes from some media voices I respect, more or less kind of sad to see that it had to get to this point for Anderson Silva to get his money. And I don't disagree with that assessment really at all, but also it's still a path that is available. And I don't think Anderson Silva minds. I think he's having fun with this whole experience. I don't think he's doing it because he needs the money. I think he's doing it because he just enjoys. He's finally able to take these boxing matches that he couldn't take for forever because of his associated with the UFC and the way that they were doing things with him and the way they weren't allowing him to kind of take these other fights. He's when I interviewed him last year, I've told him a couple times now since he started this boxing path, but when I spoke to him last year, I mean, he was saying he wants to do, kickboxing, which he that was that bet he had with Jake Paul. It was if he won, they were going to do a kickboxing match, right? He wants to do kickboxing. He wants to do Muay Thai. He wants to do grappling. He wants to do all this stuff. So, if I think he's just doing it because he's like, hey, why not? I've got time. My body still feels okay. I'm going to keep doing it. So I do hope that he gives maybe some of those other pursuits a try now. Maybe go over to, especially because he got a lot of money out of this one.
Before it's too late.
It's probably the biggest payday that he's realistically going to get, from now on. Even if he gets that long-awaited fight with Roy Jones Jr., I think this is the bigger fight, money-wise.
What if next is a newly timed out from his contract George St. Pierre? What if we finally get that in the boxing ring?
I mean, shoot. It's not like I'm not going to watch that, but I don't know. Is that what George wants to do?
I mean, I don't know. He doesn't want to fight MMA. We know that. Or
no, I don't.
Maybe we get or some sort of modified rules MMA where it's just I don't know, what the best happy medium would be, karate combat, Silva versus GSP. Because isn't that what GSP has been doing? Is he's been
GSP has an association with karate combat.
Karate combat.
I believe so. Yeah, him and I want to say Wonder Boy does as well.
Imagine if they rolled out the Brinks truck for Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre to headline one of their events.
Look, are you telling me hey, do you think you'd watch Anderson Silva versus George St. Pierre? The answer is yes. I don't care what it is. I'll watch them play mini golf. That's fine. I don't care. I just want that again. When they were doing, they were posting all these pictures from the, the face offs and the stare downs and everything. And you got George St. Pierre is in the background between them and all that kind of thing. I'm I don't even see Jake Paul here. All I see is Anderson Silva and George St. Pierre.
They've just been circling each other for decades now.
Yeah.
It's come on, guys.
I know I didn't get to read the article, so I just saw the snippet for the headline, but it was something along the lines of, they asked GSP, hey, why did this happen? And he said that they essentially weren't meeting all of his, requirements to make it happen. I don't know what that was, but yeah.
And then it was just extra insult to injury that he ended his career as the middleweight champion. It's damn it.
I know, right? Of all the times it could have happened.
But also, we've talked a little bit about what might be next for Anderson Silva. Nate Diaz is next for Jake Paul, right? He was there. He started a brawl in the backstage.
I can't believe we're talking about this. Yes.
That's almost certainly what's next, right?
Yeah. I mean, shoot. I mean, I'm not. They're not getting my money again. That's for sure. I'll wait for the highlights. That's fine.
Fool me once.
It was because it was Anderson. Anderson Silva was a freaking legend when I was getting into the sport, and then he only grew his legend as I continued to watch it. Right, Nate Diaz, obviously, he's a cult figure and he's fascinating in and of himself right now. But I don't have that kind of nostalgia connection with him. He's just someone else I have now covered along the way. So it's whatever,
I also feel like the build to that fight would be more fun than the fight itself.
Very likely.
Which it would be free to watch.
But I will say the one thing that I guess technically, from a technical standpoint, I could assess out of the Jake Paul situation and these fights that he's been having is when he's winning these decisions, he's winning decisions when the guys going against him are not as active. They're not throwing as many strikes, and they're especially not working their jabs. And I was talking with my colleague, Jared Schwartz, who's kind of our boxing guy. And I was just saying to him, I'm like, listen, I watched this fight. I'm pretty sure Anderson Silva still landed the heavier punches. And this is why I think he probably won the fight. And if this was an MMA fight, that's how I would score it. But obviously the jab was working the other way. And he's like, yeah, that's kind of the narrative that happens with all of these boxing matches now is like the, power punches versus the jab. And it seems like boxing judges are typically going to favor the one with the jab, which is stupid. And to me, it feels like it's performative. It's like you're almost trying to put on a good performance rather than you're trying to win a fight. And I think Anderson Silva was trying to win a fight in a bigger way. And granted, he didn't get a knockdown. He got knocked down. I will not take that away from Jake Paul. That he earned that. He got that. It was all him. Despite some conspiracy theories you might see out there. Oh yeah, he took a dive for the bag. It's like, shut up.
Well, that all goes to how I felt watching, and don't hear what I'm not saying here.
All right.
When I was watching Maymac,
okay,
I was shocked when I saw the scorecards to that. And yes, there was some element of Floyd playing with his food in those early rounds, but I thought that McGregor won more rounds than the judges were giving him.
I never felt that way.
No, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
Conor McGregor was outmatched as hell in that fight. But I thought that he won a couple of those early rounds, and then the judges just like, what? Okay, well, and I think a lot of it is just because they reward defense, they reward the jab a lot more than we do in MMA.
You're right. There are a lot of elements of boxing scoring, and obviously, I have the other podcast where I focus specifically on MMA scoring. I have never dove deep into boxing judging. It's not something I plan to do. It's not something I need to do. That's not my realm, right? I don't need that knowledge. It doesn't help me. If I ever thought I did, then I would change my tune. But right now I don't need it. So, but my understanding is yes, MMA judging is not, you can't just do one and then the other. You still have to learn both. Right. But yeah, it seems to me that there are things that we sitting at home are definitely not looking for that boxing judges are. And, part of that is on us to learn, but another part of that is come on, guys, I don't know. I don't like the scoring. You're supposed to try to win a fight, I guess. I don't know. I guess boxing isn't fighting. Boxing is boxing. That's probably what it is.
It is frustrating to come over from MMA and know what the MMA scoring criteria is, and then go watch a boxing match and be like, oh, that guy clearly won. And it's like, wait, what? He won that many rounds against him? What?
But if I've learned anything from my deep dive into understanding MMA judging, it's the fact that, one, I probably don't know everything. So when I watch that, I try not to go berserk, and be like, oh, robbery. I at least can sit there and be like, all right, there's probably things I don't understand. But also, as I try to understand it, I'm watching it and I'm like, I disagree. I don't think this is the way it should be done. I can sit there and I can diagnose the issue not with the people who sat in the chairs, but with the criteria with which those people are expected to assess what is happening. That's where I sit there and I fault it.
What you're saying is, don't hate the player, hate the game.
Hate the game, absolutely. When we look, think of it like this: everyone watches football. I think a lot of people watch football, right? This is, I think, a pretty good analogy here. When you sit there and you get mad at them, at the officials, because was it a catch or not a catch, right? We're sitting there and we get frustrated because every year we're trying to figure out what a catch is or not, right? I think it's been quieter this year, but it'll come back. It's always going to happen, right?
There's going to be a crucial moment in one of these games where the guy is going to catch the ball, get 2 feet inbounds, and then cross the goal line. But they were sort
of moving the ball around. Was it fully there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just some bullshit like that.
Exactly. So when we have that rule, when we have that where they're trying to figure it out or not, are we getting really mad at the official? Are we mad at Ed Huckley? Are we mad at Jerome Boker? I mean, maybe to a degree, but mostly we just get pissed off at the NFL in general because they haven't solved this. We actually place our anger in the right place in that scenario. But for whatever reason, in martial arts and combat sports and all that, we get mad at the actual people in the chairs. And it's like, guys, it's the same thing. It's all about the overarching thing. Like they're working with parameters, and those parameters are what suck.
Yeah. So this transitions nicely into some talk about the UFC Fight Night that just happened, because there was a controversial decision in the best fight of the night, in my opinion, which was Dustin Jacoby versus Khalil Roundtree.
There was,
and I want to get your take on how you scored that fight, because I know how I scored it, so I want to hear yours first.
So I watched that fight. I mean, so to preface, I watched 0 of these fights live. I didn't watch any of them on Saturday because I was at a party, and the only thing I watched that night was actually Anderson Silva and Jake Paul. So what a weird night. But I've caught up since then. I've watched most of the fights. I watched that one definitely, and I watched most of the finishes. We're a bunch of finishes. So it's a solid, fun prelim card, I think, by the way. But yeah, so I watched this fight over, and so the way it goes down is round 1 and 2 are split, right? Round 3, it's Roundtree. That one, all the judges agreed with, everybody watching at home. Round 1, I think a lot of people were up in arms thinking that ought to have been a Jacoby round, like almost easily. And they were kind of like, how the heck did this one judge split off, right? But round 2 is the one that's close, I think. So this is the one that I think is the easiest that you call a split. And you can understand one way or the other. Me personally, I gave that round to Roundtree.
Okay.
I think it's close. I think it's tough because Roundtree does hit hard, and this was pointed out to me by an official, I know. And the fact that you look at the numbers, right? The strike numbers during the fight. The strike numbers said something to the, like, Jacoby was outlanding him by like 20 strikes or something like that, right? That's what they overlaid during the broadcast. That's live. That's unofficial. When they go back and do it later, if you go to UFC stats right now, they're separated by 5 strikes. Wow. It's a very close, like you got to trust your eyes when you're watching something like that. Right? Well, sometimes it's tough because like you see the number and you're like, oh, maybe that's what I should have been seeing. You ask these questions of yourself. I think it's a natural thing. But I watched a very close fight, and I thought Roundtree, like especially later, I think was landing really hard. So I gave it to Roundtree. I think it could go either way. Yeah. I even see the first round being like, you can make a case for Roundtree because I think he's landing harder, but he loses the volume. And when you lose the volume and power's going both ways, like typically the person with the better volume is going to win. And that was Jacoby here. So, yeah, so I have it Jacoby, Roundtree.
I have it Jacoby, Roundtree. And I like Khalil Roundtree a lot. Like, so sure. I was actually rooting for him, but I think that Jacoby took that second round. And again, it was a close round. This is not me being up in arms like I was about Jan and O'Malley. I still think Jan won that fight pretty handily, if I'm being honest.
We would disagree, but
it's a close fight. But I also think if you score round by round, I think that Jan should have won that fight. But we won't relitigate that.
The only thing I would say is I think it's much easier to give the overall fight to Jan than it is to give round by round. I think if you just sat there and it was pride you'd pick a winner, you'd say Jan. I think that's actually easier. But if you go round by round, it makes it much easier to get to an O'Malley thing. But yeah, let's stick to this fight.
I think that is a more egregious judging error than anything going on with Jacoby and Roundtree. I think there's either way you are justified in saying there's a winner to Jacoby or Roundtree.
I think so.
Whereas, I think that was definitely fight of the night. I didn't watch all the fights either. I went back on ESPN Plus on Sunday evening and rewatched a lot of them then. That was the best fight that I watched of those fights.
Did you go to any Halloween parties that night, by the way?
I did not. I was supposed to, but I ended up not making it.
Okay. While we're on it, I should tell you what my costume was for the party and what I am going to be when I walk around. We're recording this on Halloween, so you're going to listen the day after. But when I walk around later today on Halloween with my kids, my costume, sir, is Ken from Street Fighter.
Nice.
Yes.
That's my main in Street Fighter.
I didn't know you were a Ken main.
Yeah.
You have to play Street Fighter.
Well, I have Street Fighter 5 downloaded on my PS5 right now.
Oh, I'll put it on because I actually put Street Fighter 4 Ultra on recently because
that's my favorite Street Fighter game, to be honest. Street Fighter 4 Ultra.
Do you happen to have that one for PS4?
Do I?
Because that's the one we should play if that's your favorite.
I know I have it on Xbox. I'll have to see if I have it on PS4, and if not, maybe I'll have to pick it up. But
yeah, we'll figure that out. But we definitely have to play. Now that I know this is something we can do, because as I told you, I just recently bought, and we're getting a little off subject. We'll come back in a minute, but I just recently bought a terabyte expansion SSD.
Yeah,
and I got I forget exactly which one it is. I'm like forgetting now, but it was the one that was officially endorsed by, or like the first one was officially endorsed by whoever was kind of behind the design of the console. I'm bad with the names. You would know this Cerny? Better. Let's pretend it's him.
Mark Cerny he was kind of like the architect of the PS4. I don't know.
If it's probably whoever's the architect of the PS5. If it's Mark Cerny,
I would imagine it would be.
But anyway, so yeah, it was like more or less endorsed by saying like, yes, this one is capable of matching the speeds that we're looking for, of load times, things like that. So I did add that to my PlayStation, and oh my goodness, the number of games that are now on my PlayStation. I kind of like, I got to points where I'm like, all right, I downloaded everything I want. I've still got more space. I guess I'll just add more.
Yeah,
I'm just adding games that I don't even know I'm going to play, but I'm like, why not?
That's how I feel about my Xbox, where it's like, oh, I want to play this at some point, and it's like, I'll download it, and then like 4 months down the road, I'll be like, I need space for like whatever this new release is. I said I was going to play this. I'm not going to play this game. I'm just going to delete it, and I'll re-download it if I feel like playing it.
But how many games do you have on your Xbox right now? Like ballpark?
Oh, I couldn't tell you, but it's so many. So many, because I got like the official like terabyte expansion. It's probably like,
okay, so you did as well,
25 or 30.
Oh,
maybe, I don't know.
I have 61 games on my PlayStation right now.
But like, also, I have a Series S, which only has a 500 gigabyte internal.
Right.
So I only have 1.5 gigabytes or terabytes. I'm sorry.
But that's what I'm saying. Like 60. Like once I got to 50 games, I'm like, oh, I think I'm good. But I'm like, I still have more space. I guess I should just put more on because why not? So I got it to 61. I could probably still put more, but I'm leaving a little space for a certain game that's coming out in a few weeks. But you know,
no idea what you're talking about.
Hey, we'll talk about that when it's coming up. But let's get back to the fights here. We've gotten a little off topic. So I think we covered that fight and the judging there, right? But there was a bunch of stuff going on. It was an unfortunate situation. That's right. We should lead with that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the first unfortunate situation I want to talk about is poor Chase Hooper.
Oh, that's what you were going for? Oh, I thought you were going for the main. Okay.
Well, we'll go to the main event next. But Chase Hooper, man, he got the business taken to him.
I got blasted. I mean, the snap on those lasers that were being thrown by Steve Garcia was furious.
It was not a good look for a guy that the UFC brought in very young, kind of has put some promotional horsepower behind, and that was an outclassing.
It was, but also it was really one of those things. Like the moment he got hit like that, like he wasn't the same fighter anymore. So it's just like that fight will not necessarily play out that way every time. I feel like, you know, you could say that about any fight, but I wouldn't necessarily say like, well, we just have like sometimes two guys meet and you're like, well, that was kind of always going to happen. I don't necessarily know that I would feel that way about this. And the fact that Chase Hooper is young. I mean, he was brought in young. He's only 23. He's still a kid. You know, he's still learning the sport in many, many ways, myriad ways. I give him much more of a pass than it sounds like you are almost. You sound like it was like, oh, a big setback. It's a setback, but he's young. And also he responded to it very well post-fight. He seems to be taking it in stride and, you know, disappointed, but also like not being too hard on him. So you see fighters get too hard on themselves on social media. And it's a shame because obviously they invest a lot, but also, you know, everything can be a lesson too. He's young and he does seem to kind of understand that he is young and that there's time.
You win or you learn.
Yeah. So, but the only person who ever said that was in Ireland, right?
I mean, I've heard other fighters say it.
I know. Oh, it comes from everything. Honestly, it comes from other places. But yeah.
But the thing that I took away from that fight is that he is just a young, undeveloped guy. Like he
underdeveloped.
Underdeveloped. Yeah, not undeveloped. Underdeveloped. Like he has a lot of growth to go. And it's like, oh man, like, and this comes off the heels of them signing Raul Rosas Jr. at age 17. He's going to be 18 by the time he makes his UFC debut. But it's like, man, like, should these guys be making their professional debuts and like kind of their early years as a professional fighter in what is purported as the greatest proving ground in the sport?
I feel like they've gotten away from branding themselves that way too, which is probably smart because it really isn't anymore. It's at this point, no, it's not, because hey, just some fights, right? Like those two guys that we enjoy, like to say. It's just unfortunate that the UFC has now gone this route, that they're from a fan standpoint. I don't think it's great. It definitely lowers the bar. It definitely makes us be harder on a fighter like Chase Hooper, right? I think if he was more the exception, I mean, he's still the exception, but also if it was more like, wow, there's only one guy like Chase Hooper where he's like 22, 23, we're bringing them in and like, hey, he's coming along. Maybe he's brought along too slow. He should still be like much lower. Put it this way. If Chase Hooper was signed to the UFC, let's say 10 years ago, I think he would be someone who'd be very much still on the early prelims. And if he was higher, he'd be on like a fight night card and they would book him appropriately. But he doesn't have that luxury. He's done well enough against the fighters he's faced. But also, yes, they put some promotional push behind him. So then people start to buy into the fact that, okay, maybe Chase Hooper really is something. He's still a kid. I think he's still learning. So,
yeah. And I don't know. I just don't. I like Chase Hooper a lot, and he seems like a really fun, unique personality.
I enjoyed speaking with him this year. Yeah,
he seems like a nice kid, right? And I'm not using that in the Dana White calling like a 35-year-old MMA veteran a kid.
He's 23. We're 37. I think it's okay we can still probably call him. I was a kid at 23. I mean
especially in fight years, he is a kid.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like he seems like a really nice guy. He seems like he's mature in the way that he approaches losses, as you had pointed out.
Sure.
And he seems like he has a lot of talent and a lot of drive to be successful in this sport. And I just hope that him being in the UFC fighting, moderate to high level competition isn't going to stunt that, because I miss the days of like the developmental deal, right? like him, Rosas Jr. And again, I have nothing against like either of those guys. I think they're both probably pretty talented. They have potentially bright futures in the UFC. But I think that having a developmental deal as an option instead of just like being like, oh, well, you were on the Contender Series, you got some headlines, let's put you in the UFC immediately. We need to kind of pump the brakes on that a little bit if we don't want, or further water down the product, because we're gonna have to sign some cans to give these guys to let them like develop in the way that we want them to.
Oh, product's definitely watered down. Everyone knows that at this point. This is not the same UFC we were watching even 3 years ago, probably. Pre-pandemic, it's been night and day.
Like in those Apex shows.
Was that? Oh, Apex shows, yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's pre ESPN.
Yeah, but I mean, how much does that coincide? It's there was only a year of pre-COVID UFC on ESPN.
But ESPN was why they have these 42 shows a year.
They were having a good amount by the end of the Fox
but I think
deal too. I think it was actually pretty close to that number even then.
Okay. Well, maybe I misremember. I thought it was like something in like the mid 30s.
So it started out that way, and then Fox kind of grew, if I recall. Like I'm going to pull up real quick as we're kind of talking here, UFC in 2018, because I can tell you how many shows that they had that particular. So they had 39 events that year.
Okay, so
they
slightly
didn't quite
below.
have 40, but it was pretty close. They had 39 the year before. 41 with one being canceled in 2016. So it's not a foreign idea. 41. Yeah, they got up into the 40s by 2015. So actually, the most that they've ever had in a year was 2014. They had 46 events.
Good God.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably like
this has been a long gestating thing. You have to go all the way back to actually 2013. So almost 10 years ago, they only had 33 that year. I believe that was the actual first year of the Fox deal, if I'm not mistaken.
Now, how many fights were on the cards back then? Because right now we're getting like anywhere from 12 to 16 fights on a card.
Let's pull up a random one, right? Let's just go Joe Rando, and we'll say on UFC on Fuel TV, Mousasi versus Latifi, which I remember watching in my parents' basement. I didn't live with my parents at this point, but I had to go to their house to watch Fuel. So I would have them record it, and I'd just go over and watch it when I was ready. And I was working out my parents' way, so it was actually okay. But yeah, so I'm looking here, and they had a 6-fight main card with before that they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 prelim fights. So it was 13 fights. This is, I think it was still normal for them to have 13-ish fights. They've gotten to even more like 14 or 15 sometimes now. That is new, but the fact that they had 13 fights on a card, I don't think was unusual. I think it was probably on the high end, but also not like, wow, they got the 13, So the card after was 5, 4, and 3. So what is that? What's 12? Yeah. So 12, 13, I think was natural.
So what's the main catalyst for this? Is it because of the Apex shows and because they just don't have to worry about bringing in a large crowd into an arena?
I think part of it. What's your question exactly? Is it the number of fights or the number of events? What?
Well, originally it was like, all right, it was the number of events, clearly, and then you're like, oh no, it's been the number of events the same as the same ballpark for years now. All right, so then it must be the number of the fights on the card. Like maybe like we used to have like 9 fight cards instead of 12 or 15 fight cards, but no, it seems like that's the same. So it must be the fact that we're in the Apex for the vast majority of fight nights, and that means that they don't need to pull in thousands of people off the streets to sell tickets and fill a gate. They have to just play to whoever they have in that crowd, which is like usually less than 100 people.
I think if I'm understanding right, and hopefully I'm taking it the right way, but I think the reason why they have so many fights right now, and the reason why a lot of them are kind of, let's say, the
just some
contender
fights.
series alums, just some fights, exactly, is it's twofold. One, they were losing fights a lot due to injuries and especially COVID for a little while. So I think they started oversigning, right? There was a while where they were not really cutting anybody. You would think they were going to cut back. Danny even said, "Oh yeah, we're going to purge the roster," and then it didn't really happen right away. It actually took a while.
They got rid of like
for them
2
to
people.
Actually start making cuts. They did. Their roster, I think, I don't even know if it's still bloated, but it got bigger. Like they actually kept more people on than they typically would have, at least for a while. Maybe that is done, but they did that. And they booked these many fights because they want to make sure they don't lose too many to the point where they can't fill like what would naturally be a broadcast. It's still, they have to book the broadcast for X amount of time anyway, but I think they're ideally looking to get X number of fights to happen on these cards too. I have no idea if that's an ESPN requirement or not. For all I know, they have contractual, obligations to meet in terms of the number of fights, which is why they want to have more. And if they lose it, then they don't lose that much. But also, it's the simple fact that they're just looking to get as many of these cheap talents on as they can. If they can sign as many contender series contracts and start trimming out some of these other fighters, like I don't know if he's cut or not, but I saw somebody posted last night that it was one of those, the fighter removed account, the one that tracked it, which I think is stupid. We treat it way too much as like, oh, someone was cut. It's like there's a billion reasons why they're removed from the rankings. First off, but I saw Krzysztof Jotko was the name that came up. Now, Krzysztof Jotko he's not going to win the middleweight title, but also he's had a high success rate in the UFC. He's not always been, let's say, the most fun fighter to watch. Sometimes the fights end up being pretty good, and most of the time I think they're just, okay. But he's a high level fighter. He probably makes a lot of money compared to the level of entertainment they're hoping to get out of it. And I think they know they get typically better entertainment value with lower level fighters because they're more likely to get a finish because there's a skill disparity. Once you get higher up, we see more decisions, right?
Yeah.
At this point, if you're a top featherweight fighter, you're going the distance if you don't suffer a fight-ending injury early in the fight.
What are you getting at?
I think is a good segue to this. I think we've got to get to the main event here. this is the unfortunate collapse of the event at the very end, right? Like, we're looking for a good fight. Arnold Allen, Calvin Kattar. I was very I think more interested in this fight than you, right? Like, I give it a higher score.
I gave it a 4.
I gave it 4.5.
Very interested.
Oh, of course. But like, I'm telling you, I was legit like very hyped for this fight. I just think it was going to be a fantastic fight. So I spoke to Arnold Allen in the week 2, and it was, he was a lovely conversation we had. But yeah, it's just, you don't want to see a fight end with Arnold, not Arnold Allen, but Calvin Kattar blows out his knee. So
let me ask you the question that we typically go for, which is, how did this main event fare against your expectations?
Oh, it met them, exceeded them. No, it was terrible. I mean, it was starting off, it was a pretty solid fight for like, let's say 4 minutes and like 40 seconds, right? Mm-hmm. Right before Calvin Kattar goes for that, I don't know, jumping flying attack. Was it a flying? It was like a flying like kinda? Flail. It was a very weird, like, he wasn't really. It was an ill-advised strike, and he landed poorly. Yeah, I think he could do more than that. I don't want to limit the guy, but like, it didn't come off great. Like, it wasn't the best. But not the point. The point being, man, he lands wrong. Obviously, does something to his knee. Goes down right away. Arnold Allen, to his credit, jumps right on top of it. He's trying to go for a choke. Can't quite get it. Bell ends, and everyone in the corner and the doctor and Herb Dean, they're all willing to let it go. And somebody whose knee obviously fell out from under him goes out there, like, 10 seconds in, plants and falls down. It's like, all right. And Herb Dean, to his credit, rushes in and ends it. He sprints across the cage, Herb Dean, right?
Meme.
Which, why were you that far away, Herb? Keep your distance, of course, but like, you knew he was hurt. Like, got to get a little closer there. I'll be a little critical to Herb Dean there, and I think he's still a high level referee. But like, sometimes, having gone through the course and knowing things about positioning the refereeing, when I did the training course over the summer, like, I feel like you're supposed to be a little closer there, so that way you can
honestly
intervene.
I'm putting this more on his corner, Calvin Kattar.
No, I think it's fair. This
is the second time they've let him go out when they probably should have called it. First one being against Max Holloway, which I think he was being pieced up, and that both of these have the potential for long-term damage. One of them more apparent than the other. One of them was just a flat-out injury. The other one is just repeated brain trauma.
It's a tricky situation, right? There's a lot to kind of sift through here, and hopefully I'll get to everything that I'm trying to think of. But let's go with Kattar and Holloway, right? That fight is much more long-term potential for massive destruction and cost of living and that kind of thing because of the amount of damage he's taking. So that's a worse situation. It's way worse. Mm-hmm. Having said that, their fighter, even as much as he's getting pieced the fuck up, right? He's landing. He lands a lot of strikes in that 4th round.
Yeah.
Which, granted, I think you could call that a 10-7 round. I think it could actually go there. Even though he lands, I think, I want to say like 40 strikes on his own. He lands like a good amount of strikes. So if you're a coach in his corner, like, obviously you can't think that he's definitely winning here, but you're seeing your fighter succeed in this round. It's not a fight where you're watching your fighter and he's like completely unable to do anything. Like, we see rounds like that. And I think you have a tendency to like look for, maybe the best in your situation for your fighter, especially in mixed martial arts where they're really not doing a whole lot of thinking about, man, we're going to live to fight another day. There's way too much of the go out on your shield culture, right? Mm-hmm. It's all built in. I'm not defending it, but what I'm saying is it's there, and I think it's part of it. Go to this fight now, Kattar against Allen. I think the potential for long-term injury obviously is there. You blow out your knee, it's tough, but also it's, he's probably not going to be walking with a limp for the rest of his life just because of this. Like, he'll get better, he'll rehab, he may not be the same fighter, he'll probably be the same person at the end of the day. So it's like, which one should he have stopped more? Like, which one was more important for them to make the right call for their fighter? Which of those two fights should they have done it more?
For importance, Holloway. For obviousness of needing to stop, this one.
Yes, I mean, I don't disagree. I think that's probably the right assessment. Yeah.
I mean, like, his knee, again, falling out, basically.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can't, like, you really shouldn't send your fighter out like that. But it's part of the culture, and I hate that part of the culture. I don't condone that part of the culture, but it's kind of like something I posted this morning about Islam Makhachev posing with the Chechen dictator. It's like, you know what? I'm not surprised. I'm just disappointed.
Yeah, it's a bummer. It sucks. But like, yes. In terms of Kattar, it's like, do we know? Like, there's no way we'll ever know like how much more severe it is as a result of him going out for that second round, as opposed to if they stopped it in between rounds. I'm assuming
maybe nothing changed. Maybe nothing changed either.
I mean,
that's the real.
I'm just operating on the assumption that every single slip up of that knee is going to make it a little bit worse.
Probably, but we don't know.
But like you said, I mean, odds are he's going to be out for at least a year now. If there's any kind of like ACL or MCL strain or tear, like he's out for a long time.
Yeah, I do not. Again, don't hear what I'm not saying, right? I'm not defending the idea of sending him out there, but also, how much worse did his knee get because of that? I don't know. It was still ill-advised. He couldn't fight. Like, obviously, he literally couldn't fight 15 more seconds. Like, the knee wasn't handling it. But I mean,
the doctor looked at him.
It's all right. Yeah, the doctor looked at him. I think, look, you can't only fail the corner here when the doctor is saying, yeah, it's all right.
That's the thing, is I'm putting the order of priority, or the order of blame that we can put on. I'm saying corner number 1, doctor number 2, herb number 3.
We get mad at ringside physicians sometimes when they'll stop a fight because of a cut or something like that, right? And sometimes even I'll be like, listen, I don't know if that was the right call, if that was not the best call, but like, they need to pay a lot more attention. I'm very critical of ringside doctors in this case. It's like, you got to look out for these fighters a little more, especially in this sport, because no one is looking out for their safety. Literally, no one's looking out for their safety except the ringside doctor, and to the degree that they can, the referee. The referee is not going to make a medical stoppage. They are going to lean on that ringside doctor.
Yep.
The ringside doctor has to help more. And, I think it was, what was it, a few weeks ago? There was it was Song Yadong against Corey Sandhagen. Mm-hmm. And I thought that fight should have been stopped a round earlier.
Yeah.
I don't think it needed to happen that much more. It didn't have to happen there. Nothing changed in it other than the fact that he was bleeding more. He didn't bleed to a higher degree. I think he just bled more. It's just end the fight. It's in a bad spot. He can't see, especially. That is the key. He cannot see. You can't keep this fight going.
I'm trying to look up this stat that I forget who it was. It was some MMA journalist that tweeted that there have been 13 UFC main events that have ended by like kind of like
that sounds like Nolan King. Did Nolan say that? Nolan's a good dude, by the way.
Yeah, but basically, like in the UFC's history, there have been 13 main events that have stopped as a result of injury
or some sort of weirdness, right? Like I think it's all inclusive.
4 of them have been in 2022.
Yeah, and 2 of them have been at featherweight in like high level featherweight fights.
I just don't even know what to say here, but like I'm trying to find the exact
They're
tweet.
just snake bait right now. This is just a weird thing, right? It's not going to happen.
Nolan King, in UFC history, there have been 13 main events that have ended due to unforeseen/accidental injury. 4 of those have been in 2022.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So yeah, it was Kattar Allen, Blades Aspinall, Ortega Rodriguez, and Blachowicz Rakic.
Yeah, that one too. I forgot about that one.
That is just wild. And like
these things happen in MMA, sir.
And Aspinall and Ortega were back-to-back weeks, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think so.
It's funny because I've been talking about how I've been trying to get my girlfriend into like just a little bit of MMA. Like she's never going to be like a diehard fan like I am, but like just like, hey, this is on. Do you want to watch it? And then they'll be like, oh yeah, we got nothing else going on. Let's watch it. So that way, like we can watch it together. But both main events that I've tried to watch with her back-to-back weeks were Rodriguez and Ortega and Aspinall Blades, and it's like,
did you show her this weekend too? Was this another?
No, we almost did because again we stayed home from the party that we were going to go to, and now I even told her I'm glad we didn't watch it because I would have been like, we're never watching fights again because you're cursed.
Yeah, honestly, I'm starting to Starting to put two and two together as well.
Hey, but we didn't watch that one live.
I understand. Hey,
alone.
She didn't watch all of the 13. She just watched, which unlucky 13 now, by the way.
Yeah,
there we go. Nolan dropped the ball there. He could have called the unlucky 13. Bad job by Nolan King. Terrible journalist. Nice.
How did the rest how did the rest of this fight card stack up against your expectations before we move on to what's ahead?
Yeah, I think, and we'll probably keep that one brief too, because we got to get over to the gaming side a little more. But yeah, I was happy. Catching up. Obviously, I watched. I didn't watch every single fight. I watched all the finishes, of which there were many. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 finishes. I watched all those. I think different degrees of fun in a lot of the cases. There was a really awesome choke from Tresean Gore against Josh Fremd. That was a wow. I mean, that choke was amazing. He had Fremd's head bent over like to a 90 degree or like on 180 almost, which was wild.
It's considered a guillotine, right? Like
it is a guillotine.
It's a weird angle, but it's still a guillotine.
No, it's a guillotine. Absolutely. You're still kind of attacking kind of in the same method. Guillotine can mean like a billion different things too. Yeah. So, but like we would call it a guillotine. Yeah. At least in English, they call it a little different, probably in different languages, right? But no, I think we had a bunch of different fun finishes here. I didn't watch every fight, so I missed a couple of the, I watched Roundtree and Jacoby, but I missed Griffin and Means. I haven't watched Jared Vandera, his loss to Waldo Cortez Acosta, and I missed Cody Durden and Carlos Mota, although I can look at the scorecards and I could probably make an educated guess about what happened in Durden Mota. That's just knowing the way Cody Durden fights he's a wrestler. I think that's probably what he was looking to do. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. I'm going to watch it anyway. I would say on the whole, I think it met my expectations. I think that's fair. The main event didn't, but this did.
Yeah. I mean, and I would say that it was about my expectations of the fights that I've watched. So again, I didn't watch any of the decisions aside from Jacoby and Roundtree.
Right. So we're in the same boat. Yeah.
But like, when you watch the highlight reel, it matches your expectations. When you have to sit live and watch all the decisions that maybe aren't up to par, then it probably would be a little bit lower, I'd imagine.
Well, I hope Griffin and Means was a good fight. I didn't get to watch it yet, but that's really just a constraint of time. I had a weekend, let's put it that way. But
I actually didn't watch that one either. So
I'm looking forward to watching it. I hope it was good. Although there was no fight of the night named, they did 4 performance bonuses instead. So I mean, granted, I thought Jacoby and Roundtree was a good fight, but yeah, with so many finishes on there, some really great finishes. Sometimes that's the way the UFC goes with their bonuses. Whatever.
Sure. So let's move ahead to the UFC Fight Night that is coming this Saturday.
Marina Rodriguez and Amanda Lemos, which is a key strawweight fight here. I think realistically, the winner of this one can put their name in the hat for getting the next shot. It's possible, especially if it's Rodriguez. Rodriguez really has been there. I think in some ways she even got skipped over on merit, but I think this is it's an interesting fight. I like this fight.
It's an interesting fight. I don't know how much I love it as a main event, but it is an interesting fight.
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair way to describe that. I'm actually kind of a little surprised, and part of this is they had to shuffle fights around, so this fight was not originally supposed to be there. But Neil Magny against Daniel Rodriguez, D-Rod, that would have been an interesting main event in terms of like, okay, at least Neil Magny, he's been in a bunch of main events, right? Daniel Rodriguez has put together, no matter what you thought, win or lose against Li Jingliang last fight, he's put together a really impressive UFC run here. He's 7-1. He started right before the pandemic hit, but yeah. And actually his first win, by the way, in the UFC was against Tim Means. That's a big way to debut. He's beat Mike Perry. He beat Kevin Lee. He got the decision against Li Jingliang, whether you feel the way or not, nonetheless. He's at a big point now in his career. And again, Magny's had a lot of these main events. I think this would have been what I would think is the main event, but it just didn't go that way.
We were supposed to have Bryce Mitchell versus Evloev on this.
That would have been a much better main event. Absolutely. I mean, this is sometimes that's the victim of these injuries, and less COVID now, but yeah.
Yeah, I think this is an okay fight card, But let's are there any fights you want to highlight outside of those top two?
Oh, before we do the ratings, I guess.
Before we do our rating.
Outside, I mean, really, I think I think Magny against Rodriguez is actually a pretty decent fight. So that's the one I would really want to highlight. But Grant Dawson and Mark O. Madsen, not Mark O. Madsen, not Mark O. Madsen, but Mark O. Madsen is. I like that fight against Grant Dawson. I think it's a fun fight.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That was the one I was looking at. I want to see Mario Bautista. I want to see his fight.
You'll see him. He's there.
He's coming off of 2 wins against Brian Kelleher and Jay Perrin. So his only loss...
The Kelleher win was a big one. That was a nice win.
Yeah, that was. I mean, he has 2 losses in the UFC. He's lost to Sandhagen, which, whatever.
I mean, look, a lot of people are going to lose to Sandhagen.
Yeah, and Trevin Jones, who another solid fighter.
Sure.
And he's beaten everybody else the UFC's putting in front of him.
Bautista has looked good, absolutely.
And so I'm excited to see him. I always like watching him fight. But yeah, I mean, aside from that Grant Dawson, I guess Tagir Ulanbekov is a good fighter. God, the third fight on this card is Josh
Ulanbekov against Nate Maness, by the way.
Yeah. Sorry, I was like, wait, did I say something wrong? But no, I just didn't name his opponent.
It just helps. I think we want to let our people know who they're fighting, right?
Yeah. Josh Parisian versus Chase Sherman. I don't know what to think of that fight, to be honest.
It's a heavyweight fight. I'm not that interested. I'm just not. Sorry.
It's a heavyweight fight.
It'll probably be the co-main event now once they said everything. Jinyu
Fry versus Polyana Vienna. I've interest in that. It's earlier on the card. It appears.
Hey, what do you think overall of this fight card? Then I mean, we're just naming fights now. But what do you think? What would you rate? So let's start with the main event. We always start with the main event, I think, right?
I'll give that
Rodriguez against Lemos.
3.
It's your level of interest.
Yeah.
3 is probably fair. I think it's because I like fights that actually have some importance. Like I'll actually get more interested in them, even when I don't necessarily love the entertainment aspect, because at least there's stakes. I really like stakes in fights. I'm less about the build up, the outside, the stuff. I really like, okay, what does this mean for who's going to be the best in the world? That's the way I like to watch this sport and engage with this sport, ideally. So, not that I can't have fun, right? But that's where I'm at. And there at least is this intrigue here. Who's going to win this fight could end up being the next title shot / eventual champion. So I like that there. So 3 is fair, but if it wasn't for that, it'd be lower. Put it that way. Oh,
absolutely, yeah.
I also am not necessarily excited that this will be a 5-round fight, because it's probably going 5 rounds, and I have a feeling I'm not going to enjoy all 5 of them.
That's why I think Magny Rodriguez, you were right about that, having that be the main event instead.
I think so too.
I don't think that would go the full 5.
I think it could go the full 5. I would believe it could go full 5, but I think it would also be an entertaining full 5.
That's fair.
Maybe not like fight of the year type stuff, but I think it'd be good. I think we would be, put it this way. You give me 5 rounds of one, 5 rounds of the other, I think Magny versus Rodriguez is going to be more entertaining.
Sure. I'll agree with you there. Let's see.
Anyway, overall, I think we're both at a 3. Overall, what would you say the rest of the card?
Man, 2.5.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that, actually.
Okay. Well, there
I almost
we go.
jumped in and just said it anyway. But yeah, we're both at 2.5. So yeah, let's say this is a down step, a significant down step off of last week. And granted, okay, it's, it's a card that's ahead of what I'm actually much more interested in than I was for UFC 280. UFC 281 in New York is going to be fantastic. We're not going to get deep into that now, but the card before the big one, I can accept this being maybe a little lower because, okay, hey, at least we got next week.
Yeah. I'm just looking at that card. We're not going to talk too much about it, but that is we found out where they consolidated the big fights.
Yeah, and that's what they do. That's the thing now. We've talked a lot about the structure during this event or this show, the structure of these cards, the way they've been building them. They do put a heavy focus now into pay-per-views. They load the pay-per-views now, top to bottom. They like to do that most of the time. Sometimes they're not as good. This one is a really good card. We'll, again, dive into it deeper later, but suffice to say, they care about the pay-per-views like to a distinctly higher degree. And then the other ones are, just some fights. I think that's how the UFC tends to treat it. And I think We just have to accept that. If you don't have to like it, but you can also say to yourself, like, I have to watch all these fights eventually because of my job. You don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Even as my podcast partner, if you sit there and say, like, listen, dude, this isn't the one. I'm going to skip this. I don't blame you. I'll catch you up. I'll tell you what you need to know.
There's a good chance that will be the case next week, to be honest. But
hey, that's fine. I got you, bro.
I have already set aside my Saturday night for UFC 281. Barring any things that pop up, we're doing an Extra Life stream to raise some money for a children's hospital here in Minnesota. But I was like, nice. Hey, I can do the morning shift, so that way I can watch UFC 281.
There you go. Smart. Very smart.
But let's talk some gaming stuff.
Yeah, let's get in a little bit of game before we got to get going here. So, what have you been playing?
I've been playing a review game that I can't talk about until next week.
Alrighty.
But, Scott, what have you been playing?
So I finally defeated Sigrun and completed my final God of War 2018 run. I'm not saying I'll never play it again, but like I'm probably not going to dip back into it again for a while. But I beat Sigrun on, again, I'm playing this, giving me God of War, the highest difficulty, the hardest difficulty, which you actually, so all the other difficulties in the game, if you select them, you can change them. You can go up, you can go down. I cannot modify it if I start Give Me God of War. You're locked in. So everything I did, totally legit. I went in there and let me tell you, man, I played against Sigrun this time. I want to say 500-ish times I died or restarted.
Oh my God.
Now, a lot of this is like, okay, maybe it didn't last very long, right? But man, I'm sitting there and I'm never getting too frustrated, right? Because I understand it's a process. Like I was getting better here and there. Like over the course of an hour, I would average getting more of her health down, right? And it was encouraging. I'm learning patterns. I'm getting better at timing. And it's I don't know if you do this with any games. Like, are there any games you've ever kind of had that where you were like, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to beat this freaking thing?
Yeah. I mean, Guitar Hero is the one that immediately comes to mind.
Okay.
Back when I was in my competitive Guitar Hero days and like,
sure.
God, that was like 15 years ago now.
And I feel like there's a lot of similarity because it really is about button timing and stuff.
Yeah. So
my experience too.
I remember starting off on medium and there was my friend would play on hard and I'd be like, oh my God, this is like mesmerizing to watch this guy play. Mm-hmm. And then eventually I started getting better and better and I got to expert and then I was like, this is impossible. And then before you knew it, like I was devoting so many hours a day to it that I was like one of the best players in the state of Maryland.
You start to see, nice. That's pretty cool. But you see the improvement. It's like, I like that. I like that a lot, that we can kind of have these growth as you go. And in a game that I'm enjoying, and I thoroughly do enjoy this game. So like, it was never frustrating. It was really just like, oh man, I'm going to get it. I know. Like, I was always encouraged that I was heading in the direction. And then one day you just get that perfect run and you got her. And like, I'm in the moment. So like, I'm realizing now, like, I'm like, man, I've done massive damage to her. Her health bar is low. Okay. Slow it down in your head. Just don't make a mistake. Like, chill. You know what to do. I had enough health bar left. I didn't get hit on this run. I took a video. I shared it. You can find it. You don't need to.
I was about to ask if you recorded it.
Oh, I did. Have I sent you the link?
No.
I will send you the link when we're done, sir. You should watch it. It's not long. It won't take much of your time. But yeah, dude, it was the hardest thing that I've ever done in a video game. It was easily the hardest accomplishment that I've ever made. You know, I grew up in the Nintendo, era. Games were hard then. You know that. Mm-hmm. I played hard games then. Some of them I accomplished the things I was trying to do. Some of them I didn't. I wasn't like a Contra guy, right?
Oh God,
that was hard. I couldn't do that, but I did this, and I'm proud of myself.
Well, good job. I'm proud of you too, Scott.
Thank you. And my mom's upstairs watching my son, so I'm sure she's proud of me too if she knew. But I've also been playing a couple of 2K sports games, actually, just kind of filling time as I await God of War Ragnarok.
Because you needed something to just constantly pester you to give it money.
Yeah, pretty much.
Good Lord. Those games, they're so good, but they try. It's like NBA 2K23 is a freaking $70 game.
I know.
And they have more microtransactions than my free-to-play Marvel game that I always complain about.
You're not wrong. But if your goal is to engage with NBA 2K23 the way I am, which is playing the Jordan career mode, more or less, I'm loving that. I think if you go there, it's like an escape. You don't have any microtransactions. Absolutely not. There's nothing on the screen. None of it. All you're trying to do is earn 3 stars for each game you play. So, like, let's say, for example, you're playing the Shrug game, like you know Michael Jordan's game where he hits the 6 3-pointers in game 1 of the finals against the Blazers, and this was back in the era where nobody was hitting 3-pointers, and Michael Jordan was not known as a 3-point guy. He could shoot it enough, but like he wasn't like the outside shooter, like premier 3-pointer shooters of the time. We're talking about Larry Bird. This was at the end of his career. And then like Dale Ellis, these type of people, right? They're
leading directly into Steve Kerr and Reggie Miller. And
exactly. It kind of changed the game after that. Like it started to grow and grow and grow. And then obviously it's exploded in the last like 6 years. But yeah, he hits 6 3-pointers in the first half, and he does this famous shrug. Like, I don't think I could do it. They lead in with like to this particular game, they let in with Marv Albert, who was on the call talking about this shrug and like his experience. He saw Jordan out there before the game shooting 3-pointers, which was atypical at the time. And, they kind of add the ambiance to that. They build it as a bit of a cinematic experience too when you're playing the game, which is really neat. You get the build up in a different way than you would if you were just playing like franchise mode even. And then your goals, you have 3 goals. One of which is to hit 6 3-pointers in the first half. Another is I think you have to score 39 points, but you have to hold Clyde Drexler to under like 17 and then win the game, right? You don't have to do them in one turn, but I like to try. So you can go back, you can play it through and get the one you missed, but I try to do it. And when you did hit that 6th 3-pointer in the first half with Jordan, as I did, they do have the shrug in the game.
That's awesome.
It's a fun experience. I really like it. I wish more, like when they do this in 2K, I love it. When they do similar type of thing in 2K Showcase for WWF, I really like WWE. Sorry. I like that too. But it's like there's just not enough of it.
MLB The Show does a little bit of that from March to October, where they have like the contextual commentary and everything. But yeah, you're right. It's not on the same level.
They don't go to that level. I wish they did, because I like a lot of the stuff that they do in MLB, but they could do more. I think they could do really a lot more, especially with they added those moments a few years ago. They've kind of leaned into these moments as a way you can play in like Diamond Dynasty and that type of stuff. But yeah, if they would lean in a lot more with moments and add in, like, let's say you could play Babe Ruth thing where he does like the point, right? Or something along those lines. There's these moments that have happened, like, sorry, it's to use their word, but it is what it is. These moments that have happened in baseball history. Why don't we make it seem like you're really experiencing them? I love that. So I'm a sucker for that. So I wish they would do more of that than they do, but they typically do not. So I'm almost at the end. I think I've done 10 of the Jordan games. I think there's like 5 more. It's 15 overall, right? So yeah, that would be it. One of them, by the way, it's not a full game. It's the Michael Jordan famous shot, where he eats the Cavs in the playoffs and early in his career. You only play that minute, like that moment of the game. It's the only one that I've played like that so far. Although I have a feeling there will be another one when Brian Russell comes up later against with the Jazz. That famous final shot of the Bulls.
Is there a dunk contest moment?
No, there hasn't been. I don't think there will be. I think we're past that point. So it would have been fun. I don't think it's coming.
Just a cool little homage.
But you do the shot, and all you do, it's like kind of like a quick timey game, like button time or whatever. And all you have to do is you have to juke Larry Nance, who's on defense before the ball comes in. You have to line up the shot and then sink the shot. It's very quick. It's honestly not hard once you realize the buttons that they're looking for you to do. You kind of don't know, but it's over in a flash and you try again. But what's great, if anyone is listening from Cleveland, or if you're a Cleveland fan, this is your chance to shine. It's almost going to be like video game sports porn for you, because you're going to sit there and you're going to try and beat this. But rather than try and beat it, you're just be like, nah, I'm going to let Craig Elo steal the inbound pass and celebrate. Or no, I'm going to let them let Jordan miss the shot, and everyone on the Cavs is celebrating. They give you that. So if you lose, you actually see it.
You see the result.
Like this is porn. Like if I was a diehard Cavs fan and like I hate that shot, I would just sit there and play that and lose over and over and over again.
So you've been playing 2K, both Battlegrounds and NBA.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mention it was 2K Battlegrounds I was playing, WWE, which is not, I wouldn't say it's a good game, but I like arcade style sports games, and that, so I'm going through the motions of playing it, and I'm, like I said, I'm kind of wasting time until God of War.
No, that makes sense. Did you see this news that The Witcher 1 is getting a remake?
I did, actually, and that kind of excited me.
So yeah, like, I mean,
and it's a full remake, ground up, right?
That's what they're saying. I mean, that's what they seem to indicate. And that's one of the Witcher projects that they kind of teased a few weeks ago where they were like, oh yeah, we've got like 3 big Witcher projects in the works. And that's one of them.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, that's much needed. I would love that. Especially like with all the lessons they've learned from The Witcher 3, where it's like The Witcher 3 is just a markedly better game than the other 2 Witcher games. Witcher 2 was
Did you
closer.
Play those?
I played a little bit of The Witcher 2, and I was like, yeah, this isn't for me.
And then
The Witcher 3 came out, and I was like, okay, this rules.
Mm-hmm.
The Witcher 3 is amazing. One of the greatest games of last generation.
I got very into that one. It took me as a surprise. They sent me, WB Games had sent over a review code to me back when I was reviewing games. And it really wasn't on my radar because I was only like kind of just starting to get this off the ground for our paper covering games and everything. And they sent it over, and I was like, all right, sure, yeah, I'll give it a try. I plugged it in, and I understood by the time they sent it to me, okay, this is a game people were looking forward to. I did my due diligence, and I played it, and I was like, oh, this is cool. I like it. And then I kept playing, and I'm like, well, I don't want to stop. So I just kept doing quest and quest and quest and quest. I was like, man, I'm hooked. It had it hooked in me for sure.
It's such a great game, and that's why I'm excited to see like The Witcher 1 get that treatment. And I mean, I wouldn't even mind The Witcher 2 getting that treatment, but that's less sorely needed.
I'm sure they'll get to it. Maybe if this does well, they'll do it too.
Yeah, for sure. And also, did you see the other Witcher news that Henry Cavill is out as Geralt on Netflix?
Is it Cavill or Cavill?
I've always said Cavill. I've heard Cavill. I've never heard Cavill.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. Whatever. But nonetheless, no, I did see that, and I was like, what the heck is going on?
Liam Hemsworth.
I don't like this. I'm not happy like about this. I mean, whatever the reason is, whatever. I thought he was I understand there are people who do not like the Witcher Netflix series. Jan Blachowicz being one of them. He was very mad about this. We've talked about this. But I thought at least he was a pretty good Geralt.
Yeah.
I think he did a good job with a role that was harder to carve out because people had in their mind, okay, he's supposed to sound like this, and he sounded a little different, but he did his own spin, and I think he did a solid job.
I think that he was the best part of that show.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say. Yeah.
A lot of the infrastructure around it, I didn't like.
I think that's fair.
And the writers have outright said like they did not pay attention to like the source material that much, and it's like
I can see why that kind of pissed everybody off, huh?
Yeah. And didn't Jan Blachowicz say it made him cry?
Yeah, yes, he did. He told me. I feel like he's exaggerating when he says this, but he's like, yes, it make me cry. He told me that. I still hear him saying that in my head, and it's wonderful.
Him losing the light heavyweight strap didn't make him cry, but watching The Witcher on Netflix and seeing them butcher the source material made him cry.
People have an emotional connection to
that. Breaks my heart.
Especially because he's Polish, right? Like this is a Polish story. It's all Polish mythology and all this type of stuff. So it means something to him specifically more than, and I think he is just kind of into fantasy and all that type of stuff. He's kind of a geek. That's kind of the read I get on him. He likes Lord of the Rings. He likes all that stuff. This is even different. It's almost cultural, you know?
So before we leave off the Witcher stuff, this kind of sparked an idea in my head. What is an older game that you think deserves a remake, like a full-on remake?
Oh, we could probably make a whole show out of this, but
I mean, maybe we can. Maybe we do that in the future.
We could. I mean, we could tease it now. I can tell you one that comes to mind.
Okay.
And I've had this thought many a time. I hope they will do it, but I don't think they would be done right now, and I think you'll know why when I say it. Metal Gear Solid 1. They obviously did Twin Snakes, right? It wasn't really a remake. It was more just like a port that they kind of upgraded a little bit from PSX to, do they still call it PSX? I guess it's PS1 now, right?
I just always call it PS1, at this point.
But they used to call it PSX. You remember that?
Well, now PSX is like their convention, PlayStation Experience.
Yeah, I guess that's
true.
They
haven't had that in several years.
Nonetheless, from PlayStation 1, or even just PlayStation, they had ported it over to GameCube, and they added some cinematics, right? They kind of upgraded things, and it was better. But like, I want a straight up ground up remake, and I want it to be like even of higher quality than we got from Metal Gear Solid 5. But obviously there's a complication there. Hideo Kojima is no longer involved, and that sucks. So I will say the caveat being, I want this game, but I want it done by Kojima. And that can only happen if they sell off the property, which, hey, I actually live in a world, at least in my head, where I could see Konami being like, nah, we're getting out of the business. We're just going to sell it off.
Yeah, I think that if they are going to do a new Metal Gear Solid game, a remake is the safest bet. That gets the new team experience with the brand, experience with the property, and then from there they could forge out. I mean, that's what it seemed like they were doing with what's the developer that did Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2?
Yeah.
And then they got absorbed into the Call of Duty team, so it all went to hell. Like, they were supposed to have Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 HD as well, but then they canceled that in favor of...
I know you were hurt by that one.
I was very hurt by that. I love those games.
I feel for you.
But the two that come to mind for me, I have a Nintendo podcast.
I've heard that. I've been on that.
You have been on that. 2 all-time great N64 titles. Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time.
Okay.
Imagine
Good
those
choices.
getting modern remakes, because they're both amazing games. However, the conventions of their respective genres have evolved so much from those foundational entries in the genres. Because I think it may have been to you, it may have been to somebody else on my podcast. I brought up the point that every 3D platformer of that era was built on the successes of Mario 64.
That's fair, yeah.
Or attempting to emulate it in some way.
Some way, they probably games have gone more in their other directions than others, but yeah. That's probably fair.
And
they established the rules.
And Ocarina of Time did the similar thing for almost every other like big open area 3D game, right?
Mm-hmm.
So imagine remaking those two games with everything that developers have learned, and also
and a better camera,
modernized controls as well. Yes, better camera and foremost. But yeah, like, just bring those over. Like, we already got one Ocarina of Time pseudo remake for the 3DS, but like, it was still very much the same controls and everything. It was just much better visuals, and then some upgrades, like the water temple was reworked and everything.
Right.
But yeah, those are my answers. There was one other that I had, but I'll save that in case we do another a show in the future.
Oh, dude, we could absolutely make a show out of this one. I mean, who doesn't have ideas for what should be remade? And I feel like you'd have to place limitations on it, maybe even more than the game studios are doing now, because they went back and redid The Last of Us so quickly. I feel like you'd have to give it like a grace period time, right? You can't just go back and do the games 6 years after they did it or whatever. Sorry, Naughty Dog, can't do that. We're not a fan. I'm not a fan anyway. I'm sure it's a lovely game. I'm not trying to diss that. It's more the idea.
We should remake Breath of the Wild.
It's honestly, I was thinking it's time to remake God of War Ragnarok.
Yes.
Can we get to that one? Just put it out every year.
So let's do one more news story from the gaming side before we wrap up.
Yeah, what do you got?
This is one that I think hits home for you.
Okay, I like that.
The co-founders of Rocksteady, the developers behind the Arkham series, have left the studio.
They did. Yeah, I saw that. I didn't get to read much about the story. I don't know why they're leaving or anything, but
Sefton Hill and Jamie Walker are the names. So let me. It's a long statement. But let's see. Our decision to leave Rocksteady was emotional, to say the least.
What's the gist? What was the I mean, do they say like F it, we hate Batman? They're just tired of Batman now?
I think they're just ready for something new.
Okay, that's fair. Well,
I mean,
that's what they're saying anyway.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what it actually is?
It's always more complicated than that, but
it always is,
because humans are just more complicated than that. But if that's what they're saying, that's what they're saying.
But they're staying at Rocksteady through the end of the year, and then they're embarking on, quote, a new adventure in gaming. So it sounds like they're probably going to leave and found their own studio again.
Sure, and you know what? why not? If that's the thing they want to do, you know, maybe they just think things are going in a different direction. They want to do something else. Maybe they feel too locked into superhero games at Rocksteady now. Maybe they just want to do something that's not super. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it's, you know, anytime you get change at a studio like that you think has put out some really quality games like they have, you know, it's unfortunate, but yeah, hey, I certainly wish the individuals very well, and I hope that the quality doesn't fall off at Rocksteady at the same time.
Well,
they have it's the Suicide Squad game that's in the works, right?
Yeah, so that comes out next year. Suicide Squad is
allegedly
planned for.
It's always alleged.
Well, it was supposed to be this year, and it got pushed.
That's what I'm saying. So, yeah. It's always allegedly.
But you know, to this point, they put out the 3 Arkham games, the 3 Rocksteady developed Arkham games. Obviously, there was
not Origins. Yeah,
that was WB Montreal, which unfortunately they were the studio that put out Gotham Knights, which did not get the reception as we talked about last episode.
I haven't heard anything better since then.
I've heard some defenders come out and be like, "Oh, this isn't as bad as everyone said." Like that's the best I've seen. You know, it's like,
it's not as bad.
Yeah, everybody said it's
we still
6
acknowledge
out of 10.
It could be bad. Yeah,
I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. That's basically like the tenor that I'm getting from a lot of the defenders.
It's okay, as opposed to
it's not below average. It's average.
I see. Which is, I still think it's so hilarious about the game industry as someone who's not in it, that 7 is average. 5 is average. 5 should be average, but 7 is treated as average.
I think it's just tricky because everybody kind of has adopted the letter grade type of thing where it's like, all right, well, in grade school, a C is considered like an average mastery of the material,
right?
Which is a 70 like to a 79.
Yes, it makes sense.
So that's kind of I think the attitude that most of us have adopted, at least early on in the days of games journalism, games criticism.
Yeah.
But now to change it after it's so ingrained, like, could you imagine if suddenly like an average game was that like they were getting 50 Metacritics? It's like, oh my God, that game sucks. And even Metacritic, if you get below like a 65, it turns to red.
Oh, is it below 65? Because I think it's below 70 is when it turns to orange.
Okay.
It's probably the whole 6. If I had to guess, I think the whole 60s is orange, and then it's probably the 50s where it turns. I'm just guessing, though. I don't remember. You're the guy who covers the game. It ain't me. So I would put more stock in what you say is what I'm saying.
I go to Metacritic maybe 10 times over the course of an entire year.
Yeah, I guess you probably don't need to. You worry about your own house, right?
Yeah, it looks like 74 and below, it turns to yellow, and then maybe 65 and below, it turns to red.
I see. Okay.
I'm just scrolling through.
You know better than me. I believe it. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I just think it's funny because. But when you put it in the context of a letter grade, as that's what you ought to be looking at, it does make a lot more sense. It really does. But I'm like, I keep waiting. I'm like, when are we going to get the game that's rated 2 out of 10? It like the 4 is already like awful. So
there's a Godzilla game that we reviewed not too long ago that had a 2 out of 10.
A Godzilla game. I think
it was 2015, 2016.
Okay, I'm going to read that review.
But yeah, I mean, there's some other news, but I don't know if we really need to hit it. Like, we've got Somerville, which is from the guy who made Limbo and Inside. That's coming out this very month, November 15th.
Oh, okay.
Sonic Prime, a TV series, an animated series that I am rather excited for, coming to Netflix
as you would be
December
Sonic
15th.
Head.
And then the Callisto Protocol, which is the upcoming kind of horror action game from the creator of Dead Space. He canceled the Japanese release because
what the heck does that mean?
They wanted to censor it so heavily that he was like, "No, we're not doing it. We're not going to compromise."
So you're just not putting it out in Japan?
Yeah.
Wow.
So hey, if he wants to take that stand, then good for him. Like, I'm glad that he's making a principled stand on that, right?
Is that like? I mean, how rare is that in today's?
It's pretty rare. I mean,
yeah.
Japan censors a lot of video games.
I didn't know this. Yeah,
but
I don't live in Japan, so I don't know.
Most of the developers will just do it. Like, they'll just be like, okay, we'll just bend to whatever asks that you have. Glenn Schofield and his Striking Distance Studios apparently did not want to do that. So
that's wild.
Good on him, I guess. If he just wanted to like have his vision be uncompromised.
Yeah, you know what? That's fine. Because like, think about it like in terms of like when film ratings come out, right? When they rate films, like, listen, we're telling you this is the rating you're going to get. You can change it if you want to achieve a different rating. Or you can be stuck with this R rating if you want a PG-13 or NC-17 if you want the R. And most of the time, these studios, obviously, they're invested in making money, so they want to make the changes. But there's still the art of it. It's an art form, and video games are an art form too. They're a highly collaborative art form in the same way a film is, right? You know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but yeah, it's I can understand why you wouldn't compromise that, especially when it's different in Japan. It sounds like you're saying where they just wouldn't allow it to be put out unless you make these changes, right? Is that what I'm understanding?
So the way it says here, it says this is the statement that Callisto Protocol's official Japanese Twitter account put out.
Okay.
It said, the Callisto Protocol has decided to stop the release of the Japanese version. As of now, the SERO, which is the ratings board over there, the SERO rating cannot be passed. We have decided that we would no longer be able to provide you with the experience you need. We hope everyone in Japan will understand. If you have already pre-ordered, we will refund you.
Yeah, so it seems like it works more like a pass-fail kind of thing rather than in the film rating, MPAA. It's not pass-fail. It's just
get NC-17.
Here's what you get. You're slapped with this. Deal with it or don't.
Yeah. Or maybe like they had like the upper bound limits of their highest rating, right? Like maybe like, all right, well, if you want to get our equivalent of a mature only rating, you can't go past this threshold. And they went, I mean, the stuff that I've seen of the Callisto, I wrote the cover story for the Callisto Protocol for Game Informer, and the stuff that they are doing is so gory, so gruesome. I understand. Like if there's going to be a game that's going to be like censored or outlawed in a country that's sensitive about that type of stuff, about like gore and violence, it's going to be this game. This game is among some of the goriest stuff I've ever seen in a video game.
Do you like gore? Like games, film, whatever? Are you into like gory stuff? Some people really like it.
It has a time and a place, right?
But like, yeah, maybe with reason, right? You kind of accept certain things.
Like one of the scenes that I saw, and I think they've shown this publicly since, but like there's just this monster that has these giant, like has two mouths and it just really razor sharp teeth, and it just walks up to because like if you die in the game, it always shows like a really brutal cutscene of the guy getting
cinematic,
brutalized, and the thing just walks up and bites into his head. And rather than just being like a clean bite, it like has to like work at it to like really rip his head off. And it is brutal. And like the stuff that they did to really make sure it is accurate to what like it would actually be to have this gore happening to this human body. Like they said, like they went and like studied like police archival footage, and like it sounds like they got to some pretty dark places to make sure that this is accurate to what it would actually be if these monsters were like killing these people.
I feel like if I bring this up, you'll remember this too, but I remember a story was written about the developers of like one of the Mortal Kombat recent releases, and the development of the fatalities, and how a lot of the developers like they had to watch all these type of things as well, and like the way the human body responds, and it kind of like it messed them up, So I wrote a history of fatalities in Mortal Kombat piece, and basically one of the questions was, how do you know when you've gone too far? Because like they're saying like, oh, when we're in there, we'll have like a multiple beat. I think it's 3 beats is that they aim for, where it's like, all right, well, he does this, and then this happens, and then this happens, and that's the final shot of the fatality. And he's like, we're in there with like stick figures on a whiteboard, like saying like, oh, this happens, and this happens, and this happens. And he's like, every once in a while, like everybody's like just laughing along, like, oh yeah, this is wild, this is like over the top, let's go for this. He said every once in a while they'll be like, ooh, I don't know how I feel about that. And he's like, that's when we've gone too far. Is like, and that's when we decide to dial it back. Is like when it's like, okay, yeah, we're like wincing instead of laughing. But that makes sense. But like, I mean, the story that I recalled is kind of the developers they would go home and it would like mess with their heads and stuff. Oh, I'm sure it does. Watching something like, geez, that's terrible. Like that's unfortunate. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you probably don't want floating around in your brain. For me, it was Tiger King. I didn't want that floating around my brain. For some people, it's probably very brutal videos of humans being brutalized. I did not watch Tiger King. Nor did I. I watched The Last Dance. That was my early pandemic entertainment. Hell yeah, and I've watched that twice now. I would watch it again. I'm fascinated by Michael Jordan's psyche, so like that's why NBA 2K, when they have his mode in particular, not that I wouldn't play it if it was somebody else. Like I would play a LeBron James version of this or Shaq or whoever, but Michael Jordan, I don't know. There's something fascinating about his psyche. He is built different than even like someone like LeBron James and all that. By the way, and I'm going to leave it on this, sir. The GOAT, the basketball GOAT, is most definitely Michael Jordan. And I teach my children that. I would agree. LeBron James is the only one that comes close, though. He is. I don't want to. It's not trying to keep him down. It's that I think the bar is higher. That's how I feel.
I hope that there's an Isaiah Thomas moment in NBA 2K23 where he is denying him access to the Dream Team.
I haven't played the Dream Team yet. I bet you that's coming, but no, I don't imagine that's in there.
I just want Isaiah Thomas to go, and I took that personally. or no, it was
the other way around.
Michael Jordan says, but he's like, I qualified, or I had the qualifications to make the team.
The qualifications,
but I was not selected.
You do play. Yeah, I was not selected. I do play. You did play against the Pistons in one game, of course, because that's a big bar when he finally clears the Pistons in his career.
Oh yeah,
that's where once he gets past them, there's no looking back.
It would be hilarious if like one of the conditions that Michael Jordan had to have this moment or to have this mode in the game was that Isaiah Thomas's face had to be censored in all the gameplay. Just give him no shine whatsoever.
That would be fun. But you know what? I think we're done here, sir. That is the show. If you like what you heard, be sure you subscribe to us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening to us right now. And while you're at it, would you kindly follow our social handles at Brian Pichet and at Scott_Fontana on Twitter and Instagram.
And if you want to reach us with questions, feedback, topics you'd like to hear about, or just letting us know what you're hyped for, hit us up at groundandpwnedpod@gmail.com or at groundandpwned on Twitter. Until next time, enjoy the fights, enjoy the games. We will talk to you next week.